All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We are talking day 25, episode 26, 40 days of 4VKM. And it's all about Russia today. Once again, the second Russians are coming. Russians are coming too. Parentheses, World War III prevented, right? We're not going to have a World War III. We're going to prevent it. Some people say World War III already happened. It was the Cold War. We won, right? And this is actually World War IV. But, that's a story for another day. Anyway, this video came out on 3/21/22. So 3/21. And it's the sequel to The Russians Are Coming 1, which was the second episode of 4VKM, which was released on 2/22/2020. So that's going to come up relevant. I already spoke on that before, but you'll see why that was important pretty soon. So, it's all about Russia. And, when I talk to people, I've heard this from Juan O'Savin, and I totally agree with it, right? There's still so many people sleeping here in America that haven't woke up to really what's going on in the world or what's going on in their own country. You're starting to see it, the numbers increase every year, every day that goes by. People are just having it with folks, right? With the government and everything like that. So, but what's it really going to truly take in order to wake everybody up, to get everybody on the same page, right? What Juan would talk about is America would have to go through a near-death experience, right? You'd have to go through a near-death experience where they would think, this is it. We're losing our country. We might even be losing our lives, right? But something that dire has to happen in order for those people, those last people, to wake up and be thankful for what they have here in America, in the United States. So, Juan talks about a near-death experience that needs to happen, right? And he makes this comparison to the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? So the Cuban Missile Crisis, for those that lived through it, I remember my dad telling me this story, and basically, I think I asked him, I said, Dad, why would they have you, you'd see the drills, the old school videos in school and whatnot of the bomb drills, right? So, during the Cold War, if they thought nukes were going to go off, they would do these bomb drills, and part of it was they'd get underneath the desk, right? And, get underneath your desk and get in the fetal position, right? And I asked my dad one time, I said, Dad, what good is that going to do, right? And his answer was perfect. He said, well, they had you do that so you could kiss your ass goodbye, right? So, so Juan basically says there's going to be an event similar to the Cuban Missile Crisis. And perhaps that's the near-death experience that everybody needs, right? So, 2/22/22. We just talked about the first Russians are coming. That came out on 2/22/2020. And 2 years later to the day, Joe Biden comes out in the White House and he says, the Russians are coming, right? And he makes that announcement at 2/22. And that was the official start of the Ukraine-Russia conflict that was going on, right? So, going back, for me again, it was wild seeing this happen. Knowing that I had that video, the Russians are coming out 2 years to the day prior to this. And then at 2/22, on 2/22, Biden makes his speech basically saying the Russians are coming, right? So I thought it was very weird, very interesting, very strange. But, who knows why it happens like that, right? Just a coincidence. So we were talking about the Cuban Missile Crisis and who was a central figure in the Cuban Missile Crisis. Well, there's two. There was our guy JFK, and then there was also Fidel Castro, right? And I talked about one of the prior episodes how JFK Jr. actually went to meet Fidel Castro in Cuba and basically asked him, hey, what happened with my dad? At least that's what we think he was talking about. So, around the same time, you have the truckers rioting in Canada. And that's when, dictator Trudeau, started seizing bank accounts and doing all this crazy stuff, right? And what were they protesting? They were protesting the mandates, the Jabsky mandates, right? So, what do we say about Justin Trudeau, right? You have Castro and you have Castro. You can see the pictures side by side. I show you the clip in here of his mom basically fainting over, Fidel Castro. So it's very interesting. I have some family in Canada, and when I ask them about this theory, nobody says no. Nobody says, oh, that's crazy, you're a conspiracy theorist. It's almost like an open secret in Canada that Trudeau is Fidel Castro's son. And it's crazy if you think about it. Absolutely freaking nuts, right? So what did JFK do to Cuba? He put the blockade into effect, right? But what were the truckers doing to Castro in Canada? They did the blockade, right? They were doing the blockade, and that's what set the whole thing off, right? So it's kind of nuts when you think about it. Now, turning to wrestling, they had a figure out of Canada. They had a couple, right? They had Bret the Hitman Hart, who was the Canadian hero, right? Canadian patriot, if you want to say that. And he had an arch enemy in Canada, or in the WWF, and that was called the Mountie. And the Mountie was dressed up like a Mountie, right? And he basically, would beat people up and lock them up and do all this crazy stuff. So you have the Mountie attacking Bret Hart, the Canadian, and then you have the Mounties and the police attacking the Canadian people, doing Trudeau Castro's bidding there. So, unbelievable, right? I also did tell you, Sami Zayn, who is Canadian, and what did he do? He was dressing up as Fidel Castro at the time. So you had that right in your face there. And there was a time at SmackDown in Miami, same SmackDown. Well, I guess you'll see that in the next episode. But I'm there. I got my 4VKM sign. I'm ready to go. And, we have little Sami Zayn coming out, Intercontinental title match against Ricochet. And as he's coming out, he's getting on the steps, and you see him look out into the crowd, and you see me right there with my 4VKM sign on television, on Fox, plain as day. Boom, you can see it clearly, and the video looks like he's looking right at it, right? So, perfect scene for this video right here, talking about Fidel Sami and Fidel Castro and Fidel Trudeau. So, shout out to Sami Zayn for all that. So, and the other thing is, I was sitting in section 107. I have a screenshot of my ticket stub in this part of the scene. So I'm in section 107 where I get seen with the sign. Perfect seats for, getting my sign on TV. I had it in a lot of good spots on this show. And then it was at the FTX Arena. And we know what happened a couple months after that. FTX Arena, FTX was that crypto exchange, Sam Bankman-Fried, that basically took everybody's money, right? So FTX in Miami, not anymore. It's not called that anymore. So, going back to Russia, we have Hillary Clinton. We have President Trump, right? What did President Trump do during the campaign in 2016? He said, Russia, if you're listening and you can find Hillary's 33,000 emails, you might find something good in there, or something along those lines, right? And then Hillary took that as Trump's Putin's puppet, and then everybody else ran with that. The media ran with it. They had the setup with the FBI and everything that came from that as well. So, not good, right? I show you some clips of Hillary really talking about, Trump's working with Russia and Putin, and then WikiLeaks is all part of it, right? Well, WikiLeaks, Pamela Anderson, right? She has a little thing going on with Julian Assange, right? Pamela Anderson was at a couple WrestleManias there, so I'm showing you that. What was really the source of WikiLeaks? Was it really the Russians or hacking the DNC? Now, most people would tell you the forensic evidence shows that the speed of transfer from which the files from the DNC left had to have been done on a thumb drive. It had to be done in person, right? So did Russians infiltrate there? Or was it a man named Seth freaking Rich? And we actually have a guy in WWE, Seth freaking Rollins, right? Who loves to say, I'm Seth freaking Rollins, right? And I give you a nice little mashup there of Vince McMahon one of the times when he was saying rich. So you get Seth freaking Rich, right? The most likely source to the DNC hack. So what's that lead to, right? That leads to Mueller time, right? Robert Mueller, right? You have Hillary Clinton. Before we get to that, Hillary Clinton, what did she do? She destroyed devices. She used bleach bit, right? Remember she said, like a cloth, right? Stupid idiot. And, reminded me of the time where there was an anonymous general manager of Raw, and that person would basically just send messages through an email and through a laptop, right? And then somebody would read the email would come in, they would go, read the message. And one day, Edge, Hall of Famer, he just lost it with this laptop, right? And what did he end up doing? He destroyed the laptop. Kind of like how Hillary's goons destroyed all the Blackberries and laptops and all this other stuff, right? So, show you that in there as well. It's all, it's all a parallel story. That's it, right? Destroy laptops, destroy phones, same thing, right? So we have Mueller time, right? Remember Robert Mueller? Remember how everybody was like, oh, Mueller's going to get him, right? And nobody had heard him talk until he went to the hearing, and then he looked like a complete buffoon, right? So, it's Mueller time. Everybody's favorite Republican, they would say. You'd have Stephen Colbert, right? Just absolutely going nuts for Robert Mueller, dancing. You had the ladies of The View. Remember when they thought General Flynn had rolled Trump or something like that, and they all celebrated, right? But they were celebrating fake news. So, you have Mueller time being set up. But at the same time, you have Barr, and you have, he's setting up some guys too. He assigns Huber. He assigns Durham during this period as well. So you have some guys working up in the background. And it kind of reminds me of those drops. Trust Barr. Trust Huber. We don't know. Were they good guys? Were they bad guys? A lot of people say they didn't do anything, but did they? Did they not? I don't know. Seems like they did have some indictments, at least on the Durham side of things. Granted, those things didn't pan out the way that everybody expected, but it reminds me of what Juan O'Savin says. You can't get to justice through the Justice Department. So is that just all proving that you can't get to justice through the Justice Department? It's interesting. Another character we introduced to you here is Kash Patel. All right, Kash Patel comes out. He's doing a either CPAC or something like that. And he basically comes out and he says, follow the money. He's like, that's what we're doing right here. And Durham's all over it. He's following the money. He's going after Steele, the Steele dossier. When I think of the Steele dossier and the gross shit that was in there, I think about the Vince McMahon lawsuit right now. It's a mirror. It's just disgusting stuff that they say is being done. And again, maybe it is. We're going to have to wait to see how that all plays out in court. But it's almost like a playbook, right? Like, let's load in some of the most disgusting shit that you can think about that nobody can defend, right? And then we're going to put it out through the media and all of our talking heads and right? There's a saying in wrestling, we lie, we cheat, we steal. It was from Eddie Guerrero. Guerrero equals 107, coincidentally. But, lie, cheat, steal. That was a cover of the New York Post once, Christopher Steele got nailed by Durham there. So I always thought that was fun. So what else here? We have, the soccer ball, right? We have President Trump meeting with Putin. And, every time he would meet with Putin, they would all jump on him and say, oh, he's Putin's puppet, right? But there is that conference that they had in Sweden or something like that, where Putin gifts Trump the soccer ball. And then he passes it to Melania, and everybody's like, what a dumbass Trump is, because there's a chip in that soccer ball, right? How could he just take that, right? And, if there's a chip in the soccer ball, maybe Putin was passing over some information to President Trump in that soccer ball. You don't hear them talk about it like that. You just hear it as, Putin must be spying on Trump. It's more leverage to prove that he's Putin's puppet, right? These people are stupid. So, remember The Last Russians Are Coming video? I showed you that clip from WrestleMania 6. and it was, I think his name's Stephen Allen, and he's playing the piano, and he's got the Russian wrestlers behind him. This is 1990, and he's about to sing the Russian national anthem, and he goes, "I get no kick from Ukraine," right? Now, I mean, it's perfect. It's absolutely perfect for what happens, because we know what happens next with Ukraine, right? So, next part of the video, we go to Paul Pelosi. This guy is a beaut, Paul Pelosi. I'm not the best public speaker, but I'm leaps and bounds better than this guy, right? He reminds me of Alex Soros. Did you guys see Alex Soros a couple weeks ago? President Trump, right? I mean, they're both clowns. All these hairs are just clowns. They can't speak in front of anybody, right? So you have Paul Pelosi Jr., he goes over to Ukraine, right? And one of the things that he says is, we're working on soccer. We're helping out with initiatives on soccer, right? Well, made me remember, eye on the ball. Remember the soccer ball that Putin handed over to Trump, right? Is he kind of pointing towards that stuff there? Who knows, right? So we have Paul Pelosi's doing business over in Ukraine. We got Hunter Biden doing business in Ukraine with Burisma. We all know about that. We got some Romney people over there, Cofer Black, who's known as a master spy, they say. And what was he doing? He was the head of counterterrorism center during, and before, and after 9/11. So this guy was in charge of counterterrorism during 9/11. And you know what happens in government and politics? When you fail, you get promoted up, right? You just keep getting jobs and keep making money, right? Then he becomes a senior advisor on Mitt Romney's presidential campaign in 2012. Why not, right? You did such a great job preventing 9/11 from happening, right? So, during the election of 2020, everybody's drilling Biden. Some people are drilling Biden. They're asking him questions about his son. Hey, talk to us about your son doing the business dealings, all this stuff, right? And Biden would just deny it. I've never talked to my son about his business dealings. I don't know. One of the lines is, I don't know what he was doing. I don't know what he was doing over there. And I show you some of the things that he was doing. Lines of cocaine. Lines of cocaine with Malia Obama. Some say he was doing Malia Obama. Very busy guy, that Hunter Biden. Living a crazy, crazy life, right? So, laptop from hell, folks. I'm not making it up. Laptop from hell. So, Biden keeps denying any involvement with his son in Burisma or any of his knowledge of it, even though there's emails saying 10% for the big guy and all this stuff, right? It's all over the place. And that reminds me of the Nickelback scene. Remember when President Trump posted the photo of Biden with the Ukraine gas executives from Burisma with Hunter Biden? They're all playing golf, right? I've never talked to my son about his business dealings overseas, yet he's playing golf with the executives at Burisma and his son. So I find it hard to believe they weren't talking business on the golf, because that's what you do on the golf course, right? You're talking business. You're not talking grandkids and whatever else Bill Clinton was talking to Loretta Lynch about, right? So it's called Rosemont Seneca, right? This is the company that they're all kind of funneling through, that they're all involved in. You got John Kerry involved in that, of course. He was just in the news. He was the climate czar. He just got replaced by John Podesta the Molester. So, it's a very sad world what these people are doing. But again, there's a mirror story going on in the WWE. And what that mirror story is there's a Russian wrestler called Ilja Dragunov. He just defended his title last night, actually, successfully. And there's another wrestler called Walter at the time, right? Now, Walter is from Europe, I think Hungary or Austria, Austria, actually, one of those countries. And, he was a very dominant NXT UK champion for a very long time. And he's feuding with Ilja Dragunov, the Russian, right? So what's interesting is that, WWE likes to own the name and likeness of their characters, right? So that's why a lot of times they'll take wrestlers in from other companies or other parts of the world. They'll rename them. This way, they own the intellectual property, right? So this caused a big outrage amongst the internet wrestling community, but unfortunately, they can't expand their thinking, right? They just assume that this is a sign that WWE is pro-Nazi, when really they're just telling a story at the end of the day. And it's like trying to teach history of World War II without mentioning the Nazis, right? You can't do it, right? So what does WWE do with this guy Walter from Austria or Hungary, one of those places, right? He goes, they change his name to Gunther Stark. Gunther Stark was a Nazi general in World War II, right? So people figure that out, right? And then they start getting pissed, like, what the hell? How are you going to name him after a Nazi? Da-da-da-da-da, right? So, they change it to just Gunther. Gunther, right? And they drop the Stark, right? So it's just Gunther. And Gunther is fighting this Ilja Dragunov character, right? So you basically have like the EU versus Russia in this battle right here. And we'll see how that plays out in a little bit. So that was always kind of crazy to me, seeing those, nobody understood it at the time. Why would they name him after a Nazi, right? Well, because it's going to mean something in a little bit. And this is before the Russia-Ukraine war started, right? A little bit before that. So we show you a little bit about Biden's quid pro quo, right? They have the whole scene where, he's with the World Economic Forum, of course. And he is, basically saying, hey, I went to Ukraine and I was supposed to give him $1 billion loan. And I told him, you're not getting the loan unless you fire the prosecutor. What was the prosecutor doing? He leaves this part out. The prosecutor was investigating Burisma and his boys, right? So, he's basically saying, hey, I'm not giving you this $1 billion unless you get rid of the prosecutor. And son of a bitch, as he says, right? They got rid of him. And then they got the $1 billion loan as a result, right? So even that was being investigated at the time of the election, right? Biden claims victory on 11/7, I believe. So 4 days about after the election. And then on 11/10, Ukraine closes the case on Biden, right? So it's like Biden becomes the president. They're like, okay, yeah, nothing to see here. Case closed. So that's Biden and Ukraine before we get to the war that breaks out years ago. And that's the most frustrating thing for the American people. They just had that bill that they tried to put through that's not going to get anywhere through the House, but I'm sure they'll come back and they'll still put something through. Langford and Schumer, right? They wanted to give another $60 billion to frickin' Ukraine, like $18 billion to Israel, and $20 billion for the border, right? I mean, just America last, or in that case, second to last, right? But the most frustrating thing is that everybody knows the corruption that's going on in Ukraine. Everybody knows that all of these Democrats and Republicans have family members doing business in Ukraine, and then we're just sending them taxpayer money for them to funnel through all their corrupt organizations, right? We know that's what's happening, right? And the fact that they keep asking for more and more money is just insane to me. It's insane to me. Hopefully it gets resolved soon. So, World War III avoided. That's part of the title of the video, and I truly believe that. Everybody's saying, oh my God, we're at the brink of World War III. Remember when actually they were saying that President Trump was going to bring us to the brink of World War III, and we actually had 4 years of peace, and we ended situations of hostility with North Korea, and Russia wasn't doing anything. They weren't taking territory or any of that stuff. Those are the good old days, right? But all this stuff, the world's been on fire ever since, Grandpa Joe's been in there, right? World War III. Well, that was a pay-per-view that WCW did for a couple years. I think 4 years that they had. And it was like their version of the Royal Rumble, right? Except they would have 3 rings. And they'd have like 60 people in the 3 rings instead of 30 people in 1 ring. So, World War III. It was a WCW event. And I show you a graphic that I made through the WWE video game where it basically is showing kind of how this fight is panning out, right? It's like you have Russia and the EU on one side, and you have America and Russia on the other side, right? You know, it's kind of like China. When we talk about China, there's good people in China, there's bad people in China. There's good people in Russia, there's bad people in Russia, right? You have a Russia deep state, you have a China deep state, you have an American deep state, you have an EU deep state. I'm sure there's some good people in the EU, right? But it's not your traditional warfare. It's not, China versus US, China versus EU, Russia versus it's not. It's, you have people on both sides kind of working together. And that's where a lot of people think that President Trump works with President Xi, and you think a lot of people think he works with Putin as well, to kind of take down their collective deep states all throughout the world, right? So what were the Russian storylines in WWE? You had John Cena versus Rusev at WrestleMania 31, I think it was, 2015. And that's when Rusev, who was the Bulgarian Brute, right? And he came out with the ravishing Russian Lana, and they fought for the United States Championship of that show. So, you have that match. So the battle lines were John Cena teaming with Ilja Dragunov. He's a good guy, Russian, right? So you have a good guy Russian versus a bad guy Russian, and the European Union Gunther, right? Who was named after a Nazi, right? What do they say is going on in Ukraine? What are they saying about the people that attacked the Donbass, right? They're Nazis. There's a lot of Nazis in Ukraine as well. So it's interesting that this kind of, they named the EU guy after a Nazi, right? So you have, lost my place here. Where were we at? So you have these guys fighting it out at WrestleMania. And then the other 2 guys, Cena and Rusev, are fighting at WrestleMania. Gunther and Ilja are fighting for their NXT UK Championship. And you have President Trump, right? So, President Trump said he was very tough on Russia. There's that situation in Syria where they eliminated some Russian troops, right? And Russia didn't do anything. They didn't counter us. They didn't attack us after that. But he did some sanctions on Russia. He was very tough on Russia, while at the same time having a respectful relationship somehow with Putin. So the whole Putin's puppet thing didn't really hold water, right? So WWE was tough on Russia. Once the Russia war broke out in 2022, they actually stopped broadcasting in Russia, which is sad for the Russian people, because I'm sure there's a lot of Russians that liked WWE TV. Now, one of the things that caught me when I was rewatching the John Cena versus Rusev match at WrestleMania, John Cena wins that match, and what role does he play on in the movies? He's the Peacemaker, right? So you have John Cena, a.k.a. the Peacemaker, and he wins his match at WrestleMania 31, wins the United States Championship, and as he's hoisting that championship in the air, there's a sign behind him in like one of the first couple rows at WrestleMania, and it says, boom, boom, boom. Wow, it's like kind of a cute thing, right? Boom, 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 right? Why else would you have that sign at WrestleMania, right? So, boom, boom, boom behind John Cena, beating the Russians right there. Thought that was pretty nice. And it just gets very interesting. You have the fake news now. You have Bill Maher. You have some people like that basically saying, hey, if Putin controlled Trump, why did Putin wait until Trump was out to go into Ukraine, right? So you have some leftists that are starting to ask questions about why that happened. Jimmy Kimmel is kind of mentioning some of this stuff too. he uses a phrase, this is the stuff that QAnon should be focused on, right? And as he says that, I show another instance of the 4VKM sign, right? Because nobody really talks about 4VKM. It's just kind of me and a small group of people who share it, right? But I like to call it the best kept secret in the QAnon community, right? So spread the love out there, folks, because more people need to hear about it for sure. So, you have Kimmel also. What else does he talk about? He talks about, and I thought this was very interesting, and who knows for sure, but we do know it was confirmed that there were biolabs in Ukraine. Victoria Nuland, if you remember her, she was very upset that this was publicized, right? I think they scrubbed it off the websites even, right? So what's interesting is that Kimmel brings this up. Kimmel talks about this on one of his shows. And he goes, the latest conspiracy that QAnon is talking about is, they're saying that Trump's speaking in code. By the way, he always says China. And he does say China funny. China, China, China. There's that meme. I miss the way he says China, right? Now, the way he was saying it, a lot of people relate that to China in the WWE from years ago, right? And if you go back to the Russians Are Coming one, I show Vince McMahon winning the Royal Rumble. And in one of the clips on that, you see him training for the Royal Rumble. And the date is 1/11/99. That same day on Raw, they did a corporate Royal Rumble where basically the winner would be the number 30 entrant, right? And this was Vince's way of getting out of the number 2 spot because he was put in the Rumble at number 2. He'd have to face Stone Cold for like 60 seconds alone. So he's trying to get out of that. So he creates this corporate Rumble. He comes out last. He eliminates the last people. And basically he thinks that he's going to be number 30. He avoided that number 2 spot until China's music hits. And China comes down. And China throws Vince McMahon over the top rope after a distraction from Stone Cold 107. So you have China eliminating Vince on 1/11. 1/11 in Gematria is the start, right? And what are people theorizing here? They're theorizing that the COVID started in China, Ukraine, a town in Ukraine named China. So it's interesting. Am I saying that's what happened? No, it's interesting though that Jimmy Kimmel brought it up. Maybe it was China over there, but it's weird. And then when I see that 1/11 is when, 1/11 was the date of that. The start is 1/11, right? And then what else happened? 2/22, the day that the whole Russia-Ukraine thing started. A couple years later, 3 years before that on 2/22, is when they announced China was going to go into the WWE Hall of Fame that year. So, wild stuff if you ask me, right? So, what's next here? Yeah, you have the New York Times, right? Now they're admitting that the laptop from hell was real. Right? This was after the election. Remember all the people that got banned on Twitter. Remember the New York Post got censored on Twitter because of it, right? So Twitter had to backtrack, all that stuff. You have Victoria Nuland speaking at Congress and basically saying, the Russians like to say that they're doing what you're doing or something like that. I said that wrong, right? But she's basically talking about projection, right? The Russians will accuse you of doing what they're actually doing. There it is. I said it right. And then I show you Tucker kind of laughing because he's the one showing this clip right here. And we know projection is the playbook of the rules for radicals, right? That's kind of what they do is they do really sick things and then they blame you for those sick things, right? So, it's not me, it's you that does this stuff with the kids and all this horrible stuff, right? And a perfect example of that is the quid pro quo. You have Joe Biden on camera admitting to a quid pro quo, right? And crickets, right? No, none of the media wants to talk about that. But then you have Zelensky and Trump. Remember before Trump left office, they tried to impeach Trump over the phone call with Zelensky, saying that that was a quid pro quo. That he was saying, hey, I need you to investigate Joe Biden, who's political enemy, right? How rich is that? Especially now over the last year when all you have is Joe Biden going after his political enemy with lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit, prosecution after prosecution after prosecution. I mean, these people are sick. You want to talk about projection? These guys are master projectors. It's just insane, right? So let's talk about Zelensky a little bit. This blew my mind when I found this out. Zelensky was an actor. This is like your classic like predictive programming. Zelensky's biggest funder ran a studio, was in the film industry, right? And creates this television show, The People's Servant, I think it was, right? And then they make Zelensky the president of Ukraine in this show, right? So this show goes on, becomes very popular. And then they make an actual political party called the People's Servant, and they run Zelensky as the damn candidate. And Zelensky wins. This guy goes from the voice of Paddington the Bear in Ukraine to president of Ukraine, right? He has no political experience. It's not like, at least with Trump was involved in politics for decades, right? He's, thought about running for president in the 80s, he was talking about. He's always taking out articles in the New York Times, writing his own editorials. But this guy was literally just a puppet that gets put into place, put into power. And one of the things he said is there'd be no war, right? He ran on peace. Well, that didn't really work out very well. So you have Zelensky, the actor. He's literally an actor. What makes a good movie? Actors, I guess, right? So it's sad, right? Now, at the same time, Zelensky's Jewish, right? So he's perfect because you can't attack him. You can't say he's working with the Nazis in Ukraine because he's Jewish, right? And his grandfather was killed by the Nazis in World War II. So can't touch him, right? Can't touch him in that regard. But what ends up happening around this time? Remember I was telling you about Gunther and Ilja. Well, Ilja's the Russian. Gunther was named after the Nazi, right? And Ilja ends up beating Gunther for the championship, right? So is that how the whole Russia thing is going to end up? Is Russia going to end up winning? I think it's inevitable. That's why it's a waste of time and money for us to just send another $60 billion, right? I mean, Ukrainians are dying for no reason other than to keep this thing going and try to exhaust the Russians when the Russians are doing better than ever with the sanctions that we put on them. Now that they've got BRICS all laid out, their currency is stronger than it has been. They're making money on oil. I mean, it's just everything is backfire that the United States has tried to do on Russia, or that Joe Biden has tried to do on Russia. Every single thing is backfired. So now, going back to kind of the start of COVID, and after they tried to impeach Trump for the whole thing, after the Mueller thing didn't work, after all these things didn't work, what ends up happening? COVID starts, right? That's when the timeline for COVID really starts ramping up as soon as these acquittals happen, right? So it's like we go from one scam to another, right? And it's just ridiculous, right? President Trump, he does the prayer breakfast, and the prayer breakfast is very interesting. He puts a couple people on blast. He puts Mike Pence on blast, right? He's basically saying, like, I hate it when people hide behind their faith and try to use their faith as the reason why they do bad decisions. We know what Pence's bad decisions were. Mitt Romney, same thing. Mitt Romney voted to impeach Trump on one of the cases. And remember that speech where he was sniffling, he was crying? Because he goes, my religion, my faith, is just, calls me to do the right thing, right? So he's fooked. Mitt Romney, he's fooked because he's tied all into this Ukraine stuff at the end of the day. And he's not running for re-election because he knows he has no chance on winning it. And it's sad that he even won to begin. I mean, the people of Utah, I wish you guys saw the writing on the wall like we all did. And, didn't let that happen. But you did. So it is what it is, right? And then he goes after Pelosi, which this is my favorite because Pelosi was like, I pray for the president. I pray for I have a heart full of love, right? And then, he basically is like, I don't respect people who say they pray for you, but they don't really mean it, right? He says that right in front of Pelosi. You can see her scowl, right? She's pissed. And somebody asks her at one of her press conferences, and she flips out. She goes, "Don't ever question me in my heart full of love," right? She was really showing a heart full of hate in that press conference there. So I think it's funny when somebody, says they're full of love, but then they start acting out and yelling at people like that, right? So, so the video ends with Kash Patel again, and don't forget he had the Punisher socks on. Name to remember, Kash Patel. And, he's kind of running down what to expect. He still thinks there's going to be justice done. We didn't get indictments that year for the people at the high, upper echelons of the FBI that were behind the Russia thing. But who knows to see, what's going to happen. There's still a lot of stuff that has to happen in this story here. And I know it's 2024, but, it's all out there still. And the last thing that we want to show is Sylvester Stallone. And if you remember back, the first Russians Are Coming, it ends with Sylvester Stallone. Stallone being interviewed for Rocky by Jerry the King Lawler, right? And, he does an Instagram post. And in his Instagram post, he's on a plane. And the caption is, "Heading into the storm." And it's something along the lines of, "That's a thunderstorm, that is," right? Like, so he's trying to clarify himself. And he's wearing a hat, and the hat has a freaking Q on it, right? So he's posting this thing, heading into the storm. He's wearing a Q. People called him out on it. He denied. He's like, "I don't even know what the Q thing is," right? Playing it all nice, right? But the interesting thing is that there's a couple people behind him, and they're not showing their face. So you wonder, why are they trying to stay anonymous? There's a woman holding up a book. In the book, it says, "Every Last Secret." And that's covering her face. And then she's kind of waving like that as well, right? So it's very interesting, to say the least, right? Who is behind that book? People have their theories. I'm not going to speculate. I'll let you guys do that. But it's interesting. And what was nice about this video is that it perfectly tied back to the first Russians Are Coming video. Between the 2/22 date, and then that's when the war got announced with Ukraine. Sylvester Stallone into that one. Sylvester Stallone into this one. So you kind of have a mirrored story between the two videos with a lot that happened in between. Some follow-up, even the Russia-China thing, right? Or the Ukraine-China thing. That same Raw is in that first Russians Are Coming, 1/11/99, right? And then China throws out Vince. You didn't see that part in the first video. Now you see it in this one. So, was that planned when I made that video 2 years ago? No. But it just so happened that all those things worked out in between. So, what I would say is go back and check out both videos if you haven't. Russians Are Coming 1, Russians Are Coming 2. I'll put the links for both below. Make sure you take the space out. HTTPS, copy, paste, remove the space on YouTube. This way you can, find them easily. Or just type in "the Russians are," letter R, coming on Rumble, and you'll find them there as well. So make sure you check that out. Make sure you guys check out the 4VKM podcast. Subscribe to that. Link below as well. That is going to launch on 2/21/24. We're going live. Can't wait. And 4VKM.com for all the episodes you can see in order. Got a lot of stuff to talk about. And this podcast is going to be a very important podcast with everything that's going on. We got an election coming up this year. We have potentially the trial of Vince McMahon happening. So ton of stuff going on. And hopefully we get some good news with this Tucker interview, and we can put an end to the Ukraine-Russia war, because there's lives being lost on both sides, and it's unnecessary, all to cover up the corruption of these sick people that run our government. So, as always, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy the show.